How's it going, everyone? This is your host, Chris Gutierrez. Really excited to be back here again with another episode. We're really excited to have a special guest today. Ed's a great friend, a great colleague, and a very knowledgeable professional in the industry. And we're going to be talking about some trending topics, specifically with social media, AI, ChatGPT, and everything else that's going on in the online world. Um, I could certainly introduce Ed, but I think I'll be doing a disservice to all the qualifications and how great this guy is. So I'll just kind of turn it over to him and let him kind of introduce himself a little bit. So, Ed, welcome to the show, man. Happy to have you here.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a private investigator, and I specialize primarily in research-based investigations. I do everything from social media and online investigations to your typical due diligence, background checks, public records, court records, asset investigations, things like that. Yeah, it's great to be here. So thanks so much for inviting me to be on.
No, man, thank you. And I said it off the record, but thanks again for your flexibility. It took a couple, going back and forth to get this scheduled, and you're a great guy, man, and I appreciate that. So, um, look, just and I want to just kind of get the audience a little bit of background on you. I know you've dived into what you specialize, but for anybody that's connected with you on LinkedIn, and maybe other social media platforms that you're on, one of the things that stands out right away is Forbes, NBC, CBS. Um, Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did you get into the industry? What was it that drove you to getting in this type of field? Was it something that just kind of fell into? Did you always have that dream of becoming an intelligence analyst, an investigator? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I love what I do now, and the fact that I sort of fell into it a little bit unintentionally is actually kind of a bit ironic because now looking back at the last 15, 20 years of my career path, it all sort of makes sense now, right? So I
Yeah.
I was always interested in law from the time I was in high school. So I had planned to, go to law school or go to college to study political science, government, things like that. So when I graduated college, my first job was a paralegal for the U.S. Justice Department in D.C. And we were working on really big litigation, business litigation at the time. A couple of years doing that, I left to go work for another organization in DC, doing a lot of background research. It wasn't for an investigation agency per se, but it was for a nonprofit that really studied a lot of how money flowed in politics and how different political organizations functioned. So that really involved a lot of digging into companies and people and finances and things like that. And then in 2016, I started my own private investigation firm, which kind of combined a lot of my passion experience in law with investigating and research. So it kind of all came together, and it really makes sense how all those things from my past kind of culminated into this. And so since then, I've tried to be really active in helping, really trying to be involved in the profession and in the industry to learn as much as I can and be involved in how things are shaping up, because quite a lot has really come onto the stage in the last 10 years, and as we're seeing, it's really continuing to develop.
Yeah, yeah, totally. No, and your commitment is, definitely reflected. Some things that you didn't mention, but it just goes to show your commitment too. You're vice president now of the National Council of Investigative and Security Services. Where that's a mutual organization that we're both part of. Great community there, right? A lot of great professionals, great network too, and that just all goes to the development and improvement of the industry overall. So just because I know some of the audience are probably gonna, they probably thought about this when you mentioned Department of Justice DC, and then you mentioned politics. And then you mentioned doing some research as far as, like, how the money flows within there. without sharing anything specific and throwing anybody under the bus or doing anything of that. Uh, did you ever like see anything, just kind of remarkable that stuck to you as far as like things in general that were going on when you were involved in those type of research processes?
A little bit, yeah. In fact, doing that kind of work is a lot like doing a due diligence background investigation. Now, I mean, you're looking for a lot. You're looking for things that could potentially be red flags, but things that could potentially get someone hung up in some kind of PR nightmare. So really, there is a lot of overlap between legal investigations, PR, and crisis management, and political research, and just general background investigations and due diligence. So what I
Yeah,
was doing is, looking. We were some of the things that we would see would be along the lines of financial issues. So, for example, a certain politician took a lot of money from a particular lobbyist or a special interest group, and then seeing how that influenced the way he or she voted in Congress. It's an example that we see all the time in political ads. And sometimes even before someone enters politics, that could be a subject of investigation, and just to see what kind of businesses they were involved in, what kind of reputation they had in the industry or profession that they were in before. So it really is kind of a lifestyle and lifelong sort of background check in those
yeah.
sorts of circumstances. And you have to think very creatively in those cases.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, these are the people that are making, critical decisions for the country, right? So you would want to have the right research being conducted before they're either elected or even once after election to make sure that everything, it's going the way it's supposed to go. So that's great, man. Let's talk about one of the trending topics right now, which is ChatGPT. Open AI. It's been something that I think tremendously developed quickly, especially after COVID. When we look back at the timeline and how quickly technology not necessarily started evolving, but it started being accessible to the public. COVID was really, in my opinion, that just that push that took it over the peak and started making it more accessible to everybody. A lot of it not necessarily maybe because of a want, it was a lot of a need, right? That the technology needed to be there for people to connect for work and do all sorts of things. um so on that note, ChatGPT, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, have you used it or have you personally implemented it? Like what do you think about ChatGPT and then integrating that within investigations?
Yeah, so ChatGPT is sort of just one component of like the general artificial intelligence world that we're just seeing it quite exploding over the last
Right.
couple of years. So ChatGPT is a more conversational. The reason why it's so popular is because it's such an easy to use conversational way to interact with AI.
Right.
AI has been a part of a lot of the different tools that we use for the last couple of years. It's just been more sort of a background thing. So when we
Yep.
use a social media database or something like that, there's a lot of algorithmic stuff going on in the background, artificial intelligence that's piecing things together so we don't really have to think about it. But ChatGPT really brought things to everyone's right to everyone's desktop and right at their fingertips at a way to access information that we didn't really uh, uh, the way to we didn't really interact with it before. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of I've used ChatGPT a lot to do certain things with when I'm thinking about marketing or business development, or how to write a particular email in this way, or how do I write a branding guide, a business plan, things like that is really good because it's going to help you sort of get a good outline piece together, and compose something. It sort of helps you along the way. So
Yeah.
that's why I think ChatGPT I've used at least so far in the past is we're still in the very primitive ages of it, and I think it's going to go great places in
Yeah.
in the coming few years.
Yeah, totally. No, I agree with you. And I want to dissect a couple of things that you mentioned, which is AI has been around for quite several years now, right? And it was more happening in the background, and at least on our devices. For example, let's use the iPhone as an example, right? There's Siri, and Siri was introduced several years ago. Siri is artificial intelligence, is analyzing, and as I'm saying, Siri, of course, all of my Apple devices are like up here and listening. So that's AI, right? It's triggering, it's understanding a certain command, and then it's basically giving you a prompt based on a command. And that's AI technology that happens in the background, so we don't see it a lot. But yeah, ChatGPT more being command based, and it's generative language models, and it's more of very easy to just chat with it and for it to give you a response. Um, I don't know. I'm sure you've came across this, but now they're releasing GPTs. So almost like a app store, but for ChatGPT, where now you can go in there and you can develop your own GPT, and you can make this detective analyst or a data analyst or a marketing person, and this is ChatGPT basically doing that for you, but you're training it on how to analyze and how to kick back certain information and in what format you want it, so that basically you program it that way, and next time you just basically command this particular GPT, and it assists you with that. So um, definitely lots of ways to utilize it. But I think you really nailed on the most common ones that at least in the investigations world, it can be utilized immediately, which is like marketing, which is kind of going over that writer's block when responding to an email. Even with analyzing large volumes of data more number wise, not so much necessarily the analytical component of like the facts, but more number wise, where you need to rearrange certain spreadsheets or make sense of certain numbers and get data from there. And this might apply more for like forensic accounting or those financial crime type of investigations. I find that to be very helpful too. And it's more in a beta section right now where you can activate the beta, the analytical component. So that's great stuff, man. ChatGPT. I mean, what's your projection? Do you think that if you had to project, how quickly ChatGPT is going to advance into actually doing some of the components that we do in investigation? One, do you think that that's at some point going to happen? And two, what's your time frame that you think it would take for it to happen to get to that point?
Yeah, I think we're like you mentioned. I think we're going to see a lot of great applications for it when it comes to analyzing large data sets and things that would really be sort of a very labor intensive, but a very predictable and very repetitive thing for investigators. I think AI tools and artificial intelligence in general is going to be a great help in sort of analyzing this bulk data or analyzing information. But the key is once the information has been properly collected, and that's going to be sort of the barrier where the area that AI can't really get to quite yet.
Yeah.
So for people who do investigations like I do, which is going to individual county court databases and indexes and websites to search methodically for court records. We know that some of these websites are very hard to access. Some
Yeah.
of them haven't been redesigned since the 80s, if
Yeah.
websites were even around then. And
Yeah.
so when you have sort of these inconsistent data collection portals, it becomes hard for a tool to sort of learn all the different nuances for those things to collect and then ingest and analyze. So as investigators, we I think it's up really still the onus is on us to know our sources and to know where the information is coming from, where the information exists and knowing where it exists and knowing how to go get it. And then once we do, I think AI is going to be quite a swift tool to use when it comes to analyzing all that kind of stuff. So, like you said, large spreadsheets and things like that, it'll be great on, because the data is already presented to it and the data is already accessible to it in a very clean, consistent format. So
Yeah,
I think the time frame is, it's definitely so rapid that we're seeing every week, every month, new kind of releases with ChatGPT, but also it's changing the game of the entrepreneurial world, because everybody now wants to latch on to AI technology and develop some sort of different tool that can do something different, that they can
totally.
sell for a, like a monthly subscription or something like that. So we're going to see pretty rapid development in the AI sphere.
Yeah, yeah. No, and it's a great differentiator, right? If you know how to leverage it properly. And you transitioned there a little bit into a conversation that we were having off the record, which is there isn't one platform that really has all information, right? And I think that's for some of our listeners that not may not necessarily be investigators or may not necessarily perform online type of investigations. um, some people, and I've heard it before when I was in law enforcement, like, well, why don't you just go and just search it on your computer and like it should come up there, right? And it's like and even in law enforcement, there's different systems, and there isn't just one general that would just have everything for one person. um, and on our end, through Strike National Investigations, through my company, I mean, we do social media investigations too, but more on the insurance side of things, insurance claims. And even to do just a thorough social media investigation, it's not just one platform. It's, I can't probably count them with all of my fingers. It's like so many different sources that you have to check to be able to at least get as thorough as possible. Um, what's your thought on some of these platforms, paid platforms out there? I think one of the common ones, as far as like public records, is like Unicord, right? Unicord, and there's different, you can access core records. But then, what has been your experience as far as the accuracy? Like, do you actually get all the data or accurate data through this, or do you find yourself having to go directly with the courts and get the information there?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, the databases and the tools that we all use on a daily basis are absolutely essential. They're definitely helpful in getting us started, and they save us untold numbers of hours of
Yeah,
time that we would have to invest, without them. So,
agree.
with that being said, they are aggregating data. Essentially, any kind of tool or database is meant to just do something in a quick fashion. It's they're definitely accurate and great at pulling in a lot of information, but there's always that piece of, you don't know what you don't know. So if we it's kind of like taking kind of like a bird's eye view of something, and you really get a great picture of like a wide angle view of everything going on, but you kind of have to focus in on certain areas that might require a little bit more examination. So for the court records, for example, every state and every county and sometimes even every municipality has their own different way of record keeping. So
Yeah,
uh, in some jurisdictions, you may have the state court and county court, and then various city and municipal courts, and not all of them are sharing or uploading their data and making it accessible to third-party databases. So that's why you may do a database search and find all this great stuff, but you may only be hitting a certain percentage of all the possible things that exist out there. So definitely essential tools to use, but it's about knowing, going back to what I was mentioning about knowing your sources and knowing what's included, what's not included, what you might have to sort of zoom in more on to get a better idea and a more accurate picture.
yeah, yeah. And I think what helps a lot too, a lot of the databases are good nowadays being transparent with where they're collecting the data from, right? And that, as investigators, that helps us understanding, okay, you're selling us this data, and this is what's kicking back when we search certain criteria or certain type of information. But where are you collecting this data from, and where is this coming from? So that now, as an investigator, I can make the determination, how likely is it that this data is accurate and that is current and not outdated. And now you make the decision as the investigator, whether you're going to move forward with it or not, or there's additional research that has to be conducted. um, I'm sure social media is one of those topics, and especially in the investigations world, with a large amount of the population being on social media nowadays and posting tremendous amount of content daily on everything that they're doing. There's just an invaluable amount of information that can be collected just through social media. Tell us about maybe, a case that comes to mind, and again, without having to share too specifics, but that you just remember this case because, man, it just there was something, extravagant that happened in that case, or just something, impressive that really wasn't much of the norm as the other cases.
Yeah, so a lot of cases, especially recently, are very surprising in the fact that we'll do a search of many of the common social media platforms and find that either the person does not have an account there, or their privacy settings are set so high that it's really there's really isn't much value to be found there anyway. So no
Yeah.
content, no pictures, things like that. So we've really expanded the scope of the kinds of sites and platforms that we search on. So maybe, for example, back in 10 years ago, Facebook was the most ubiquitous social media platform there was. Maybe Twitter and as well, and Instagram, or one or two others. But you had the main sites, and really, if someone had a social media account, it was going to be on one of those sites. Now it's a little different where, yeah, they may have an account there, but maybe they're using it less actively, have higher privacy settings than they used to, or just in general have weaned off of it and gone to different platforms. So now in 2023, going on 2024, there are many other social media sites that have come up, and many different platforms, and many ways of sharing information that and having interactions that didn't exist before. So one thing that we've done is that really surprised me in a lot of cases was, we might find their Facebook or their Twitter or their Instagram, and there's not much there. So, call it a day. There really isn't much there. But we'll look for other sites and platforms like their Venmo account,
Yeah.
their TikTok account. Some people also have dating profiles, things like that. And using those sort of secondary platforms and tools has sometimes been more surprising than the mainstream social media sites. So someone might not want to post on their Facebook or their LinkedIn, things that they're doing that they may not want the world to know, but maybe their Venmo account has some details and transaction history of who they're hanging out with and where they're going, and what kinds of activities they're engaging in, because they don't really think of Venmo as a social media platform per se. So
Totally.
the guard is down a little bit, and there's some great information that could be obtained from some of these non-mainstream social media sites. So I think in the past couple of years, that's really what's on many cases what has been most surprising.
Yeah, yeah, and to add to that, I think that a lot of the increment of lack of content on the people's individual profiles has to do with, nowadays people are more of a data consumer, or a content consumer, rather than a content producer, right? People have TikTok accounts, but they're usually not posting anything on TikTok. They're usually consuming content from TikTok. So they'll just have an account. They might have a profile picture. They might have a profile picture not of them, and they might not necessarily have anything posted on their TikTok, but they're on TikTok every day, all day, and they're just consuming the content. And same thing for like Instagram and Facebook, Snapchat, and ton of other ones that just keep being created. Um, And the other thing that you touch based on, which it's very important too, is the privacy settings, right? I think more and more, lately, at least over the last, I would say maybe the last year, I've seen it rank up a little bit more, where these platforms have been much better at notifying consumers or individuals about their data privacy settings and how to adjust those if they want, certain privacy privileges, or take advantage of certain privacy settings there. And I think that has contributed in some ways to the type of data that we're seeing when we're doing those investigations. Because I remember back then when I was working for a carrier at the time, and we used to be able to look at the location history of an individual, like on their Facebook. Um, and this wasn't so much like what they were posting, is more like when we would meet with them in person and say, hey, you say you were at this location on this day at this time. Are you okay, like, if we look at your account together and you can show us and we can confirm that you were there? And people were surprised, like, what? This keeps the location history, right? Or on an iPhone, significant locations, or on Google Maps, a timeline. And I think more and more people started becoming aware of these things and then changing their privacy settings. But there's certainly ways around it. And some platforms, let's say like Scope Now, they introduce a feature with uploading an image and then being able to search for somebody based on like their facial characteristics. Have you utilized that? What has been your experience with those type of search functionalities?
Yeah, the facial recognition is also another sort of offshoot of AI that I think is going to be a really huge game changer with investigations, and particularly when it comes to like you said, having an image of a person and then using a tool to basically see where else that image exists. So only a few years ago, the only tool that we had that was even close to that was just reverse image searching. And what
Yep.
that is doing, by and large, is it's just seeing if that same exact image exists somewhere else on the internet. It's not doing facial recognition or what we consider facial recognition per se. Now there are several facial recognition tools out there. Some are free, some are paid, where you can take an image of someone and actually recognizes the facial patterns, and then goes and finds other images, different images of that same person. It's a mind blowing tool and advancement with artificial intelligence, of being able to use that to identify other social media accounts of someone. Particularly in cases when another thing people are doing for privacy now is not using their full name or real name on their social media account. So their Instagram username might be soccer fan 123, and their bio might have a whole bunch of stuff, but they never really say their real name, or maybe they use their first name and middle name. So finding somebody online is becoming a little bit trickier, where you can't just search their first and last name and hope it pulls up everything. So facial recognition tools are going to be a huge advancement in that sense of finding things that were sort of beyond our reach before.
Yeah, yeah, and you hit the nail there when it comes to usernames, right? Nowadays, when you actually can identify somebody and you can tie them to a particular account, and now you have that username tends to be kind of like your digging tool, because people tend to use the same or similar usernames across other platforms that they have, and they keep it consistent. And now that allows us to, as professionals, to search based on that username too. And all of a sudden, oh, now we have, 5 profiles with the same exact username. Great. Now let's look into this, right? And let's see what comes up there. So definitely definitely a lot of, analytical skills and creative ways to get around some of the current challenges. But that, I think, goes back to what we were talking just earlier in the conversation, which is AI at the point that it can replace, completely an investigator, right? Like, can basically a client, whether it's an insurance company, whether it's a law firm, whether it's, corporate, whatever it is, can they just utilize AI and completely replace that investigator? And I think we both agree that no, it's not there, and I don't really think it's going to be there, at least for several many years. It definitely will streamline the process, and it will make it much more quicker and much more easy to comb through vast amounts of data, but not really at the level of replacing, fully replacing, at least without some human involvement. So, um, as we're wrapping this up, obviously, through the institute, the National Education Institute of Investigations, education is something that it's very important, and we think that that's really the equalizer between everybody. Why is education important for you?
Yeah, I think it's because when it comes to investigations, things are always changing so rapidly, and we don't know what we don't know, and there might be another tool or resource out there, or something, some database or index or repository that we did not know existed. We see a lot of times on um, different forums and communities of investigators asking each other, "How do I find this?" or "How do I find that?" And sometimes there's a tool just right under our nose that's available to us. A lot of times there are actually government databases that are free and open to the public, and so
Yeah,
there are some great resources out there. There are thousands of things that we have to keep in our brain at any one given time. So I think education and training is definitely critical for knowing and keeping up with the changes, whether they might be AI or whether they might be just traditional the things that we use every day. So I think it's important to stay on top of those topics, so that we can just keep delivering the best service we can for our clients. And our clients have the expectation that we are the experts and that we are the professionals. So it is our duty and responsibility to make sure that we're well trained and that educated, especially for a lot of the solos and small businesses out there, to
yeah.
make sure that we're not staying too isolated, and that we're keeping up with the latest trends and techniques.
Yeah, yeah, and it really is a developing process, right? Something that an expert is not, at least the way I see it, it's not somebody that gets a certification as an expert once and that's it. They know it all. Like you really have to just stay on top of these things. Like you're subscribing to all these different associations, to all these different groups. Signing up to education institutes, and you're just staying on top of like the trends, what's going on, because whatever was working last month for, let's say, a social media platform may not necessarily work this month because there was some changes. And had you not stayed on top of that, and had you not known that, there's it's going to be much more difficult for you to stay on top of things and be able to deliver the quality that clients deserve, right? And I think that's the common consensus there is, we're all doing it to be able to deliver a great work product, and to be able to do a good job. So um, it was great having you on the show, man. It's always good to talk to other colleagues in the industry, bounce some ideas, talk about what's trending, and yeah, thanks for your time. Hopefully, we can have you back here soon, and I'm sure right now we're talking about Chat GPT, and I'm sure 6 months from now it's probably going to be something much more like mind blowing that we probably were not anticipating. So I'm really curious to see what that is at that time.
Yeah, yeah, and holiday shopping is right around the corner, so it's interesting to see. Maybe we can use artificial intelligence to help us find good deals on some gifts and things like that.
Yeah, you know what? I have not tried that, but I'm about to go on ChatGPT right now and say, hey, rather than find me all the targets within a 70-mile radius that have the less lines statistically and that have the better deals, right? And then during what time should I go to get
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's all there, and it's just how we apply it, and so it'll be very interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah, that's funny, man. Yeah, no, I think you make a great point. Well, hey, Ed, it was great again having you, man. Great chat, and I think our listeners are certainly gonna get a lot of insight as to open source social media and everything that's going on in the online world nowadays.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure being on with you.
Great. Thanks, man. Likewise.